When I started covering Yu-Gi-Oh! Monster Backstories back in 2018, I assumed many of the stories I was talking about were done once there was an apparent ending, or just a lack of new cards featuring the monsters. However, I've learned over the many years I've been doing this, Konami will just randomly add to a story when they have new art for us, or they want to expand on an archetype. So for this video, I want to reopen the history books on monsters I've covered before, and see what additions have been made to their lore. Any monsters are eligible if they were involved in an entry in my 7 previous backstory videos, and if they have been featured on any cards since their entry to expand on what we knew. The backstory can be expanded past the original ending, in the middle, as a prequel, or even as an alternate storyline. And as with my other backstory lists, I'll be piecing together the story based on what we see, so part of it may be my speculation and interpretation. I'll summarize what we knew before the revisions too. Now, let's write a new chapter for the top 10 Yu-Gi-Oh! Monster backstories that got revised. Number 10, Behemoth, the king of all animals. He was number 10 on my 5th backstory list, and he returns as number 10 here. Behemoth, the king of all animals, is a beast who either got his title by winning off screen a lot, or he just named himself that, since this guy is the Glass Joe of the animal kingdom. He cannot win for crap, and all of his opponents are much tinier. While it's unclear who picked the fights first, and how long a gap there is between each fight, the victor is decisive. Cross Counter is where I start the story, where Desk Kangaroo, a winner of at least 2 other fights, gets a direct hit to the face, stopping Behemoth from any sort of attack. With some of his teeth knocked out from that, now he has to deal with Rescue Rabbit, who got a lucky punch on the tail. Then with a welt on his eye and a bandage on his horn, he has to deal with a set uppercut from the super nimble Mega Hamster. And finally, a charge to the gut by the Rush Recklessly Warthog. After all this, Behemoth calls his brother or friend for help on Underdog, saying, "They're bigging on me," to Alpha, the master of beasts. No idea if the question mark by Alpha is confusion that Behemoth would lose, or if he just doesn't believe that all these tiny animals would beat him up so easily. But if he felt like it, Alpha could go Beast King Unleashed mode. That being said, I think this is just how he enters a room. I feel like he leaves it all alone based on how I developed the story. This is essentially where it ended the first time, but I have a few older cards that I'm moving to this new part of the story. During the big cattle drive, you see he's healed up, but Kangaroo and Rabbit are still bothering him since they know he's a pushover. He can't even stand up to Duck Dummy since that rabbit scares him so much. This catches the attention of Manticore of Darkness behind him, who challenges Behemoth. Manticore uses his threatening roar to stop Behemoth, but that's just a delay. They have an epic battle off screen, and the new addition to this backstory, bunch of beast bodies, where they both go down as the tiny monsters watch from afar and are like, well damn, maybe we shouldn't have been so brazen. It's possible this happened before the fights with the small animals, since his horn is broken off here, but his injuries are inconsistent. Sometimes he has all his teeth, other times he doesn't, so you do have to fill in some blanks. Plus, a new form emerges from this battle on the same terrain that occurs at the end of the story, which is why I think it's at the end. Now he's Behemoth, the king of 100 battles. His horn is gone and his colors are diluted, and now he can get revenge on all those animals, or not. We don't see any cards with this specific form, but we know how he got here. We saw at least 5 of those 100 battles. Number 9, the Blue Eyes White Dragon. One of the most requested monsters to cover was the Blue Eyes White Dragon, which I went over on my 4th backstory list. Though about half the cards featuring Blue Eyes in its alternate forms are just references to the manga and anime, so I mostly focused on Paladin of White Dragon and covered a bit of the Eyes of Blue tribe in that video. However, with Blue Eyes getting a structure deck in 2024 in Japan, they added a few cards featuring that Eyes of Blue tribe, and it shows there's a bit more of a story to it. Still not much, but hey, we got something. With the older cards, they originally did some rituals at the Mausoleum of White, which summoned the Blue Eyes White Dragon, and I assume it brings good fortune to those who see it. I also like to think it leaves behind the White Stone of Legend as a symbol of luck. The tribe was made up of the Maiden, Master, Priestess, Protector, and Sage. With the new cards, we see where one of these rituals actually takes place. In the Maiden's new form, Maiden of White, she prays at the Dragon Shrine, previously empty outside of its keeper being there. With the Maiden's wishes, she summons a variation of the dragon, Azure Eyes Silver Dragon, on wishes for Eyes of Blue. While we don't exactly know what happens after this part of the story, I like to think it affects something somewhere else. We got another new monster named Spirit with Eyes of Blue, which appears to be the Blue Eyes mini statue from the mausoleum but brought to life. The maiden is noticeably missing from the mausoleum card, so maybe she was summoning Azure Eyes at the shrine during the mausoleum scene while the rest were performing a different part of the ritual that reanimates the statue. What they're going to do with this mini Blue Eyes, I don't know, but I like the concept that there's a small pet-sized Blue Eyes that now exists. Number 8, Raigeki. On my 5th backstory list, I thought it would be fun to get together all the lightning spell cards and relate them back to the classic Thunderbolt spell, Raigeki. I had the idea that it was maybe just the Thunderbolt at different angles, or perhaps Lightning Vortex's 3 strikes were Raigeki, Lightning Storm, and Raime, maybe started by a random thunder monster, like Kaminari Attack. But no, they're all different occurrences thanks to some alternate artwork we've gotten. Raigeki's alternate art shows that its source is actually Slifer the Sky Dragon, raining lightning down upon ye to clear your monsters, which he's also doing on his own alternate art. This also means that any cards featuring Slifer are now involved in Raigeki's backstory, though most of his appearances just depict manga scenes, so to get Slifer's real backstory, you gotta read the manga. As for Lightning Storm, the alternate art shows that this strike was caused by Chimera Tech Rampage Dragon, which once again means any card featuring the 3 cyber dragons that make up Rampage Dragon visually are now involved in Lightning Storm's backstory, but they're mostly on cards that show them being built, so we can only assume that Cyber Dragon upgrades lead to a lightning storm. In the end, while the lore for the lightning strikes can't be connected, we can now guess that if there's a major lightning storm in Yu-Gi-Oh, a famous monster might be behind it. What's Thunder Dragon Titan up to? Number 7, the Trap Tricks and the Trap Hole Guys. In my 4th backstory video, I covered the Trap Tricks, and on the 5th, I covered the guys who fall into the trap holes a lot. So let's combine them for this entry to see what's new. There's a green, orange, and armored guy who constantly fall into trap holes, but somehow they get out. I go over each one in the 5th backstory list, with the only out-of-story addition being the orange dude falling into Banishing Trap Hole. But for the holes that bring them to their canonical doom, someone tricks them that there's a pretty goblin lady on Treacherous Trap Hole, where they both get stuck and they see it's actually a doll, feeling bamboozled. Then the orange guy climbs out on Double Trap Hole and goes after the goblin lady he thinks is actually real, but it's just a doll again. Fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, well, how could you fall for that? Then they both get out on Breakoff Trap Hole, only to fall into another one with the final doll, where they're holding on for dear life. But this trap hole gets expanded to Giant Trap Hole when the knight wanders over to the area, and they all fall to the bottom, where they're greeted by the orchestrators of these pitfalls, the Trap Tricks, a bunch of humanoid ladies with aspects of carnivorous plants, insects, and arachnids who might be less human than they appear. They knew these goblins would fall for the old lady doll trick, and the knight I guess was just unlucky, so Dianaya and Mantis invite them into their garden to help them get out of this mess. But the sweat drops on these guys were the proper instincts, since the moment they set foot in there, it's dinner time, but it's a very one-sided dinner time. The story initially ended on Trap Tricks Trap Hole Nightmare, where the Trap Tricks reveal more realistic versions of the carnivorous beings they're based on. Trap Tricks Atrax is webbing up the knight, Mermelio is just gonna eat the orange one raw, and the green one is falling into Nepenthe's mouth. And before we go to the new parts of the story, here's a dramatic interpretation of what it was like when the Trap Tricks lured in the guys, featuring my regular co-host in my other Yu-Gi-Oh! And anime videos, Judgment Meter.
We'll help you get out of here. Yeah, just follow us to uncertain doom.
Where did you say?
Follow us to uncertain doom.
I don't know if that sounds...
The way out. We're gonna show you the way out.
Do you think this is a good idea? It's probably fine.
No, we're gonna show you the way out. This way.
A few minutes later...
Oh God,
no,
it's
no, no! When I first covered this, I jokingly said with no follow-up, maybe they got out, but now it's been confirmed, nope, they definitely didn't. On Trap Tracks, we see the knight's broken helmet and a skull with 2 horns, so possibly the green guy, surrounded by the web and goo of 2 of the newer boss monsters, Adipus and Pinguicula, respectively, meaning the other trap tricks shared with their sisters. Aw, that's nice of them. Pingu might have even taken one of their skulls and put it as a lair decoration. She also continues the tradition of the Trap Tricks Xyz monsters having other trap tricks in the shot, with Jen Lisea and Vesiculo in the background. And I like that Vesiculo is in the same pose as she is on her own card, but just annoyed that Pingu is taking the spotlight, possibly implying that she was always off to the left of Vesiculo, but off screen this whole time. Also, for the Green Goblin, he might have survived briefly, as he was held in the mouth of Trap Tricks Pudica, Nepenthes' twin sister, on terrifying Trap Hole Nightmare, and Mantis comes along to be creepy alongside Pudica. I could joke that the orange guy also has a chance to make it out since he wasn't on Trap Tracks, but Dionea has some skulls with nervous eyes, so I think they probably gave the skull to her when they were done feeding. Final note, I initially said it was ambiguous if the girls were the owners of the carnivorous pets, or if the big bugs and plants were their true forms, but with Trap Tricks getting their own structure deck, we got new concept art, so I can confirm we technically still don't know, but it might be a combo of the two, leaning towards the latter. With Pingu, one of her eyes seems to be covered with a tear coming out, but the extra art shows that it's actually a mouth hole with drool, implying that she eats through the fake eye, and the back of Jen Lisea's head has a mouth and eyes, with its pigtails acting as arms. Arachnocampa has a big worm creature attached to her pigtails, and for Adipus, she's being taught how to smile by Atrax, since she needs to act human when showing prey that she's just a harmless lady with no ulterior motives. There's even more extra art, but in conclusion, I think that they're hybrids who are anime girls by default in terms of personality, with their face just being for talking, but they release their carnivorous side when it's time to feast. That being said, I think it's still open to interpretation. Number 6, Slacker Magician. I covered her on my second backstory list when the story was still actively being released. However, they released her final form Down Nerd Magician before the storyline started, so I didn't even realize it was active to begin with at the time. Slacker Magician was a potion creator who was unmotivated. She was out of school and unemployed, known as a NEET, indicated by her Japanese name, Shy Neat Magician, except she's not unemployed since she runs a potion shop with her friend Alchemic Magician, but Slacker's barely contributing. Alchemic tries to motivate her and starts resorting to physical force to get Slacker to pay attention, including the violent act of pinching her cheek, but during that, Akashic Magician barges in to say she's the best potion maker in town. Her and Alchemic have an anime rival stare down as Akashic servants hold them back, and this is where the story ended when I covered it. I just thought the rivalry fueled Slacker to become Down Nerd, but we got one more card, clearly named Get Out, where Slacker kicks them all out since she's kind of annoyed by them. I feel bad for Alchemic. She has a sadly offended facial expression on. She was just trying to help in the end. And now that Slacker has taken her break and was left alone, she quote-unquote transforms into Down Nerd Magician, where she's having a bit of maniacal fun with these new mixtures. What's she gonna do with that rodent? From a gameplay perspective, Down Nerd can even use Slacker Magician to summon herself during main phase 2, meaning she just needed a bit of rest before unlocking her true potential. And with that potential, she creates the drink Stim Pack. But the secret ending I never discussed initially is on side effects, where Horned Imp drinks too many experimental potions and gets gastrointestinal issues. I hope he at least reported that back to Down Nerd so she could update the formula. And before we end this segment, once again, here's Judgment Meter with an immersive reenactment of what it sounded like when the magicians were fighting.
I'm just gonna put a dash of this in here, and a dash of that in here, and then I'm just gonna roll over and watch my soaps. You've been watching soaps for the last 5 hours. Get off your bum and do something. Good news, guys, I have an idea. I have some soaps to watch.
Scene missing.
Calm down, guys. I don't want anyone else to get hurt. I already have a boo-boo. My soaps are on. Get the f*** out. Okay, soaps are done. Time to get work. Just getting high here.
Number 5. Gaga Gigo. I generally consider Gaga Gigo to be the original long-term story in Yu-Gi-Oh!, which you could probably tell based on how well it ranked in my original backstory video. While a backstory never got any extension before or after the original book ends, Konami tends to tweak Gaga Gigo's story in the middle parts prior to him being out on his own. In short, for the original backstory, he used to be Gigobite, was raised by Area the Water Charmer, grew up to become Gaga Gigo, and now he wanders the world but eventually ends up in the darkness, where he meets Marauding Captain. The both of them defend each other against greater enemies and become allies, but then Gaga Gigo gets lost in a different dimension. He takes part in an experiment to get stronger and possibly escape, but he loses his humanity in the process. When he returns to the main world in this form, called Giga Gaga Gigo, the general of Marauding Captain, named Freed, challenges him to a fight in hopes to purify and or tame him. But the reptile mutates further into Go Giga Gaga Gigo, and with the final pleas of the captain to remember their partnership, it somehow purifies him into becoming Gaga Gigo the Risen. I mistakenly referred to this version of him as a new evil form in my initial video, but no, he's good. He's called Awakened Hero Gaga Gigo in Japanese. Don't really know what's going on in Dimensional Barrier though. I can't tell if he's being sent away or breaking through the barrier, but this is technically where the story ends. Ever since the original video, the parts with the army and the older Gaga Gigo have seemingly stayed the same. I don't think we've gotten any new cards with them on them, but what seemed like a footnote with Area the Water Charmer was actually the most updated. With the constant updates to the Charmers as an archetype, Gaga Gigo naturally appeared on that artwork, being her familiar. The added parts of the story show that he learned his fighting techniques and morals from his time with Area. When the 4 elemental Charmers get together, they power up their familiars and become one with them. In possessed partnerships, you see how each familiar combines with their respective Charmer, usually attaching to their clothes or staff, but Gaga Gigo, known as Gigabite at the time, reminds me of, for lack of a better term, a stand, or when it's time to fight, his attacks are so strong, they drag Area along with him as seen on her alternate artwork. But as with the ones we raise, we eventually have to let them go. The 4 elemental Charmers each released their familiars on the Awakening of the Possessed series of cards, showing them leaping forward in this very cool anime super move angle. For Water, Gaga Gigo's name is a combination of his eventual name and his younger names when they had bite in them, being Gagigobite, showing that he's in a transitionary period in his life. I've always viewed these cards as the Charmers setting them free, supported by their link forms not showing them with their little buddies anymore, and this would explain why Gaga Gigo went off on his own and dropped the bite in his name. Finally, the card Unpossessed just shows all the familiars on their own, free to do whatever they want in the world, and Gaga Gigo is crossing his arms like, yeah, I'm the man, I'm gonna go on an adventure, or go ice skating or something, thereby closing the book on this chapter of his life. Wonder how his friends are doing. Is the nefarious archfiend Eater of Nefariousness still nefarious and or eating? Well, regardless, we know how Gaga Gigo did with his future endeavors. Number 4. Gen X Controller. On my 6th backstory list, I dedicated a few entries to the Worm Invasion storyline, which leads into the Fabled Invasion, and one of those entries centered around Gen X Controller, a robot that's a part of these technological creatures called the Gen X that are meant to improve the environment. However, with the Worm Alien Invasion going on, the 4 elemental tribes work together to create the Ally of Justice series of machines to fight them, with the help from Gen X Power. Gen X Controller was used as central command for their biggest creation, Decisive Armor, which ultimately took out the Worm boss, and one of the other major allies of Justice, Field Marshal, used Gen X Controller's friend, Gen X Spare. When the Field Marshal was destroyed, the Spare was also not long for this world, and he passed on his favorite flower to Controller as a final gesture to continue protecting the world he loved. At some point after this part of the story, the Gen X fell obsolete and were taken over by a supernatural force called the Evil Swarm, which has its own long story on how they were vanquished, but what matters for the Gen X is at the end, this giant being, Sophia the Goddess of Rebirth, had to come out and destroy some stuff and then recreate what was destroyed. The goddess coming out re-sparked something in the Gen X programming, causing the Controller to be rebuilt with his buddy Spare filling in the missing pieces, creating Repair Gen X Controller. Look at that, he's got an eye and hand from both of them, and most importantly, the flower is back. With this new spark, it rebuilds some of the other Gen X like Undyne and Turing, but its magnum opus is combining the two allies of justice, each of them powered, Field Marshal and Decisive Armor. Together, they form Arms of Return Gen X Zero, and the mission of this ultimate machine? Kill God, specifically Sophia. Unfortunately, this information is just in the storyline book, so we don't have a picture of it, but conceptually it sounds cool. I think this story really would have benefited from showing the Gen X actually fighting. But yeah, that's basically where the story ends for now. Gen X Controller's revival is just a cog for a greater power that wants the destruction, so it was more just a cameo for the Gen X that could be developed later on. Still, it was good to see the Gen X come back after all this time. Number 3, Witchcrafter Madame Vere. Discussed on my 4th backstory list, Madame Vere and her band of witchcrafters seemed like a linear storyline. They lived within the magical citadel of Endymion, where they would make magical crafts based around the main theme of their cards, like painting, sculpting, jewelry, etc. Then they would collaborate for projects led by their smug-looking leader, Madame Vere, the specialist of glass. Since Vere is such an expert at this, she's napping on the materials, much to the dismay of her partners, but when she wakes up, she leads the witchcrafters to a full-on collaboration project using all of their specialties to create their witchcrafter masterpiece. Together, they make a giant golem, possibly based on the magician they have pictured on the wall in Witchcrafter Patronus. I like to think the golem idea came from their newest recruit, Witchcrafter Genie, who worked as a servant for the leader of this magical citadel, Endymion, and now she's living a simpler life. The golem is revealed by Vere and a slightly manic Genie who's giving me an "it's alive" vibe.
You guys aren't gonna believe what we have in store for you. Everyone, make some room. Golem and Madame Vere are coming in, and we need backup, and all the people just make room.
That's where the story initially ended when I covered it. We didn't have any idea what the golem was for, it just seemed like a neat art project. But with the info we have now, we still don't entirely know, but it may have been a test. Shortly after, Madame Vere leaves a note to the rest of the guild saying she's out, so long, good luck. Well, I don't recall her saying good luck, with the other witchcrafters reacting as you'd expect. Edel is angry, with Shmieta trying to calm her down, as with what was happening when Vere was snoozing. Jeannie is very emotional with the scrolls now that she can't get her guidance in learning, and Hain, who was the nervous one during the Witchcrafter unveiling, is nervous again since not only is Vere gone, but she's been entrusted to be the new leader.
Guys, gather round. I just got a note that said that Madame Vere she says, peace out, bitches. I have all of her stuff, but I don't know how to use it. Whatever. I'm gonna kill her. It's gonna be okay. Sucks for you. We're here too.
So Hain takes the role of Witchcrafter Vice Madame, and with being a fusion, it looks like she's getting support from the still disgruntled Edel and Jeannie, who's just happy to be included. You can see Hain's hand is still shaking, meaning she's putting on her brave face, but I like the personality. As for Vere, we don't exactly know where she went, but we got a tip on what her backstory was like before the Witchcrafters. She used to be a part of the Magistus, a guild of spellcasters that vanquish evil and such. She was Riliona, the Magistus of Vere. Despite Vere looking older, all other members appear to be younger versions of other monsters, most notably Endymion, who leads that magical citadel, showing that this is indeed a past version of Vere. My guess is when they all split off, Vere restricted her power and just went into her small smug form so she could live a mostly peaceful life. Something like how Frieza has his first form where he rides around in his little car. With her former Magistus partner Crowley finding the Book of Law and performing forbidden fusions with it, becoming Alistair the Invoker, which is a whole other backstory on its own, Vere likely caught wind of the creatures he's unleashing on the city and knew she couldn't just sit back in the safety of the Witchcrafter by Street. So in knowing how the rest of the crafters were able to make the golem, and with it being a possible protector, she hastily left, and the next time we see her, she's back in her Riliona form using Vere magic, La Crema of Light, on one of of Alistair's creations invoked Cocytus. Perhaps he was attacking the Citadel on the card Invocation where Cocytus was being summoned. Vare also has the form Re-Leona, the wondrous Magistus Witch Wardrobe, which might be her at full power when she has to unleash it if the creature gets too unruly. No one knows how it truly ends, but if Witchcrafter Patronus is the end of the story, maybe the guild heard about Vare's legacy and dedicated this picture to her. Her goodbye is called Witchcrafter Confusion Confession, so maybe she confessed her history there. And to note, there is a manga with various Yu-Gi-Oh! Monster stories showing Crowley learning to summon creatures before going rogue, but I like to think these are separate continuities. Going back to her Magistus form to save the world is a pretty cool ending for Vare, right? Number 2, Warrior Digrapher. Appearing on my first backstory list, Warrior Digrapher has one of the easiest backstories to revise because it involves Yu-Gi-Oh's multiverse known as the Different Dimension or DD, where portals just appear to take you away and potentially converge the timelines. Digrapher gets lost in there and is left with branching pathways that can help him acquire new weapons and forms, and if he plays his cards wrong, he gets even more branching pathways that only lead him to evil corrupted versions of himself. The most notable of these outcomes is the demon Dark Lucius when he's falling down the evil pathway, and the noble Knight Digrapher being one of his best outcomes. And consistently, he's running into another warrior stuck in the dimension, DD Warrior Lady, who got her full backstory covered on that same list. All their cards showed them fighting in the initial backstory, but their relationship softens in the updated part of Digrapher's storyline. More on that in a bit. Even though Digrapher's forms seem to be from the end of storylines, the card Different Dimension Encounter shows Knight Digrapher and Dark Lucius ending up in the same location, and the newer cards featuring Digrapher have him in his default appearance, which makes me think there are as many timelines at once as there are Digrapher monsters, but only for him, as there still seems to only be one DD Warrior Lady. This is most telling on a newer card for the backstory Double Die, showing Knight Digrapher being loaded into the lobby, so to speak, of the dimensions, and in the background, you can see the original Grepher also entering in as he did with Unexpected Die from the original backstory. However, what if both Unexpected Die and Double Die are different scenes, and Digrapher is constantly re-entering the lobby whenever the book is closed on a storyline? The original story ended ambiguously, with Knight Digrapher getting thrown back into the normal world on premature return, but what if whenever he escapes or loses his mind, it's like a Groundhog's Day experience where he starts over with his new memories in his original body, but his other forms stay around for some reason. We also got the card Expected Die, showing him haphazardly attacking Despair from the dark, which might be how he got in this predicament in the first place, but regardless, we have two new outcomes for Digrapher that keep him in his default form. The bigger one is on DD Post, where Digrapher apparently has developed a crush on DD Warrior Lady, possibly after encountering her so many times and realizing she's not the enemy. This card is fantastic because look at it! Not just because Digrapher has that pose with that face, but that is a really good DD Warrior Lady drawing. I want that as an icon in Master Duel. It even has the different dimension gate that she was jumping out of in the background. This card also shows us that there's a postal system in this dimension. She somehow gets his love letter and meets up with him, where he seems to have exchanged his small army for a couple of musicians that look like they know the Perry Knights, and he tries to impress her with the Die Dance. Once again, an amazing looking card. The poses and facial expressions are great.
Ew, I don't want him to touch me. He already tried to kill me with his sword, and now he's going back to me. I didn't even want to read his letter, and he's so gross. Doesn't he get that I really don't like him? He's such a weirdo. Wait, so his crotch holder is only on his crotch? It doesn't go back to his butt? That's interesting. Maybe it's just sewn onto his pants?
I've never really thought about looking at Digrapher that closely.
I try.
Do you have any funny DD Warrior Lady observations while you're at it?
I mean, I totally believe that she can defend herself, but the trauma is still there. Oh, wow, she's cool.
Her face reminds me of yours when we did the Dangerous Snake Pit bit.
Oh, snake. Are you recording now?
I never stopped the recording.
Oh.
That's all we see from this interaction. Dance was released in 2018 and Post was released in 2025, so there could eventually be a real result from this action, but it might take a while, so we can only assume that DD Warrior Lady just left after this. Feeling rejected, this either counts as an ending for Digrapher where he resets, or he just wanders around afterwards. But we do have a different ending on How Did Di Get Here, where he ends up in the Mayakashi village. This card also has no follow-up, but with him being out of the different dimension, I consider this to be a temporary ending, taking him out of the repeating hell for closure, yet not feeling like it truly ends. What that real ending will be, I don't know, but I feel DD Warrior Lady will be around when it happens. For honorable mentions, I just want to shout out Dark King of the Abyss and Condemned Witch, who I covered initially on my first and second backstory lists respectively. I covered Witch's update on my 6th backstory list when I did an entry on her final form, Condemned Dark Lord, and I updated Abyss's backstory on my 7th backstory list when I went over Dark Ruler Hades, so if they didn't get those entries, they would have easily been here for sure. Consider those the prototype entries for this list of revisions. For number 1, I'm going with a monster from my initial backstory list who has simply gotten random additions here and there over the years that fleshed out his backstory nicely. Number 1, Goblin of Greed. Ever since I covered Goblin of Greed in 2018, he feels like he's become a secondary mascot for Yu-Gi-Oh! With how much he appears, so much so that his story now feels like it's a repeating circle, where you can start anywhere during it and it will logically lead you back to where you started. I think the best place to start would be on Upstart Goblin, his premier card before even his monster card came out, where he's on top, and he makes people beg for mere coins from his collection, and he laughs about it. We see in this kingdom of sorts, he has at least one other goblin minion who likely helps him steal now, being the guy on Hidden Fangs of Revenge. The fortune dries up for him soon though. I don't think there are any cards showing him midway between his fancy collar and the ripped clothing, but I like to think he lost his fortune with a combination of a heavy slump, his bubble crashing, and he got ransacked by the Dark Scorpion gang. Hey, look in the distance, that guy from Hidden Fangs of Revenge was there with him all along. I also think that guy might have betrayed him too, because he doesn't look too happy on the revenge card. To regain his fortune that he got through scamming, he planned to steal the famous pot and jar of greed so he could resell them. He starts with the jar of greed when a supplier is carrying goods into town, where he hides in the cart to sneak into his next location. Then he stops by a shop to steal everyone's favorite pot of greed, giving him 2 valuables to set his plan into motion. He tries to sell the pot of greed to a noble, but it's quickly discovered the pot was damaged, so Goblin retreats before he suffers any major repercussions. To make up for the broken pots, he tries snake charming on the street for cash on Goblin Circus, but the sinister serpent he was working with just attacks him instead. Seeing him at his lowest point, the guy he just tried to scam makes him grovel for coins in a reversal of Upstart Goblin. With the spare change in random parts, he begs to return the pots with interest, but the shopkeep just throws them back in his face, breaking them even more. He doesn't give up so easily though, as Redeemable Jar shows he glued everything back together, and with single purchase, he was able to get a new pot of duality in exchange for his junk pots from a vendor. However, the scammer gets scammed as the handle breaks off on the seemingly new pot, so Goblin demands a recall. The vendor offers him a pot of desires instead, but I don't think Goblin trusts him anymore. Leaving the Goblin with no other options, he decides he needs to make an honest living now, getting a job at the Dark Factory of Mass Production, where he assembles the Moki Moki with hard work and nah. He knows this factory has a pot of greed for easy thievery, which is where I thought the story ended, with him just reverting back to his old ways, but there is more to this heist. On extra buck, he goes to a store that seems to be collecting all the pots and exchanges the pot of greed for cash. Then on sales pitch, we see he did take the pot of desires and is just trying to make a straight sale for it on the street where he was doing his snake charming. And on Kingyo Sukui, he's running the gold fishing game at a festival, where he scams the disappointed kid from another backstory with a game he can never win because the net keeps breaking. Okay, that's a bit too far, man. That kid's gone through a lot. Still, as you can see, he's accumulating funds again, so he goes back home to his shack outside the castle he likely used to live in, and he witnesses the chaos of That Grass Looks Greener, where the dog Sniffus is attacking nettles in his yard, causing his pollinosis to act up. So he does some gardening on Waking the Dragon, where the sinister serpent is ready to attack him again. But after that sidetrack, we get to the end of this story on land flipping, where a real estate goblin will sell him the castle now that he has the funds, likely putting him back in his upstart goblin phase again. Will he lose everything this time? Likely. On land flipping, you can see the seller has some evil internal monologue shadow behind him. And what could that that mean? Maybe he knows this castle is more trouble than it's worth, like it's on the verge of a bubble crash, or prone to pilfering by thieves, meaning the goblin will lose everything and end up in a stealing phase again, leading to a full loop of the story where he eventually gets the funds again. And as mentioned, you can start anywhere in this story to make it work. Maybe he starts at the shack and buys the castle as his dream mansion, but gets corrupted by wealth. Or maybe he's a petty thief who works his way up only to get knocked back down. Or even a factory worker who gives in to his vices and steals the pot of greed, leading him down a hedonistic path. I look forward to seeing if any new cards that feature him end up breaking the chain. But for now, Goblin of Greed's backstory got the changes it needed to be one of the most intriguing Yu-Gi-Oh! Monster backstories. Now, what did you think? Were the revisions on all these backstories game-changing, or are there other monsters who have evolved that deserve even more praise? And what are some of your favorite card backstories, whether I discussed them or not? Let me know in the comments. Anyway, thank you all for watching, and I will see you in the next video.